All right, everybody, this is Jay Papasan. I'm here with Jeff Woods. Welcome to the One Thing webinar. Super excited for this month's talk. We're going to talk about expected value, EV for short, with our guest and good friend, Billy Murphy. The whole idea here is how can you make better entrepreneurial decisions and life decisions by actually calculating the odds? And one way to look at it is how can you take the risk out of your decision making? When we think about risk, it often stops us from taking action. But if we're really confident in the odds of our success, it actually increases the likelihood that we will act and therefore achieve those extraordinary results that we're all after. So really quickly, Billy Murphy, he runs a website called Forever Jobless because he has built an empire around passive income that allows him to live a fabulous lifestyle. And it is really cool. And he's just one of the most down-to-earth people. I got to meet him over coffee, and I remember being struck by someone who's that successful, that he's humble, approachable, thoughtful, no ego at all, just one of the nicest people I've ever met. So you're definitely going to enjoy hearing from him and learning from someone who's been so thoughtful on their path to success. So really quickly, a reminder, throughout this webinar, you can use the questions toolbar to ask our team questions and to log questions that you would like Billy, Jeff, or I to answer during the Q&A session at the end. I'll quickly remind us of what the One Thing's all about for people who are new to the book. Maybe take 5 minutes, and I'm going to bring Billy on for our interview where we'll walk you through how to take the risk out of your decisions. And then last 15 minutes of the hour, we're going to try to get to as many of your specific questions as possible because that's what we want for you. We want you to get your answers and your questions answered so that this has the maximum value for you. Quick reminder, you see that smiling face right there? That's Jeff Woods.
Oh, no.
He is our partner here at The One Thing and building out our online training with Time Blocking Mastery. If you haven't checked out our new Facebook page, The One Thing Book, that's facebook.com, The One Thing Book. You can see all the stuff that we're doing. We'll obviously be promoting our webinars there. And what's really cool and why I've got Jeff's mugs up there, I've never seen him actually get uncomfortable at the side of his own picture. This is great.
Well, you picked the most flattering picture possible.
So I tried to pause it with your mouth open because it always happens to me.
Yeah.
So you've got this, and twice a week on Mondays and Thursdays at 1 p.m. Central Time, he's doing Facebook Live broadcast where he's sharing what's going on. This is a picture of him broadcasting from Gary's offices downstairs, the COB study where we often meet with him and talk strategy. And so you can kind of get the behind the scenes tour of what's going on here if you tune in there. So wanted to make you aware if you weren't already.
And the whole goal there, guys, is for us to be able to interact live. I mean, I'll bring some content twice a week that will actually help you, but you legitimately get to interact with me live, and that's another chance for us to do Q&A, and just it's all the goal of adding value.
Cool. All right. So on to the topic du jour, expected value, the one thing for taking the risk out of your decisions with Billy Murphy. I'm going to introduce Billy at longer length, but you just need to know he was a professional poker player. He built a seven-figure poker training business and over 20 e-commerce stores. His blog, Forever Jobless, has some of the best, most thoughtful posts you're going to read out there and just great stuff. So after this, if you haven't already read it, I definitely encourage you to go there and just search for, if you search for EV Billy Murphy, it is going to show up on Google and lead you right there. And it's one of those posts that have influenced a whole lot of people. So really quickly, a refresher. What's the one thing all about? Why do we do this series? It's about productivity, folks. It's about getting extraordinary results every single day. We really wanted to keep it simple. We wanted to give you a path to extraordinary that doesn't require you to live in complicated stuff every day. So fundamentally, it's about how do you do less? Focus on the few that give you the majority of your results. And that's the 80-20 principle, right? That the minority of what we do gives us the majority of what we want. And this is just that on steroids. We don't want you to focus on the 20%. We want you to do the 20% of the 20% of the 20% until you get to what number?
1.
That's right. That's what it's all about. There we go. What you get in exchange for narrowing your focus is what we call the domino effect. Hopefully everybody here has lined up dominoes, right? You line them up just so you can do one thing, knock over that first domino, and all of them will fall over. And it's the theme of the book. How do we align our dominoes to get maximum effect? And one of the cool things that we learned in the research for this book, it was about a 5-year journey for us, is that a 2-inch domino can knock over a 3-inch domino, and a 3-inch domino can knock over a 4.5-inch domino. Essentially, each one can get 50% larger, and it will have the power and momentum to knock it over. And there was a guy named Loren Whitehead that wrote about this back in 1984 in the American Journal of Physics, and he built them, as you can see on your screen. But imagine that first domino being 2 inches and the last one being bigger than a door. And by 9 dominoes, that's how big it got. And that got us thinking, if you could build them, right, just theoretically, what would that look like, But this is the shape of success, right? If you start with that 2-inch domino, it doesn't look like anything's happening, but by the 18th domino, it would knock over one that was taller than the Leaning Tower. By the 23rd, it would knock over one taller than the Eiffel Tower. And just a reminder, folks, the Eiffel Tower is over 1,000 feet tall. It's twice as tall as any building I can look out my window in Austin, Texas and see. It's an enormous structure. I just always think of the earrings and I forget that it's a giant structure. By the 31st, it would be knocking over a domino 3,000 feet above Everest, and by the 57th, one that would spread the difference between the Earth and the Moon. And so look at that hockey stick shape. That's what they call these graphs. Anything that grows at an exponential rate will eventually look like this if you graph it out. We think this is the shape of great success. You figure out what your one thing is. You start doing it, and in the beginning, we stumble. It doesn't feel like we're doing very much. It's that 2-inch domino. But faster than you'll realize, the achievements you will get momentum, and it will get bigger and more powerful. And this is what most businesses look like. They start slow and they get big. And you're going to hear this theme from Billy today. By doing the right thing up front, you can get amazing results on the other end. But the size of the results you'll get is many times magnified because you were willing to start small and focus on the most important things. It's a huge lesson, delayed gratitude, whatever you want to call it, but it's a difference between people who are millionaires and those who aren't. Our principle, kind of at the heart of the book, is once you figure that one thing out, why work for it all the time? Make it a habit, just like brushing your teeth, right? I always call out my kids, and until they are perfect, I will continue. I got a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old, and I still have to remind them to brush their teeth. Hopefully no one on this webinar still needs that reminder. That in the morning and at the end of the day, and some people even at lunch, they're going to brush their teeth because they know it's good for them, and it's a habit that they use to maintain their health. I've heard some doctors say that it would add 6 years to your life just by adding flossing to that. Dental health is huge. But we want our most important work to be a habit. And in our research, that takes 66 days. So it's not overnight, but it's not 5 years. It's just 66 days. It's 10 short weeks so that you can be building a habit that will serve you for the rest of your life. Finally, kind of in the Cliff Note version of our book, if you haven't had a chance to read it or listen to it on Audible, we did identify the 7 big buckets where you would apply this. It doesn't make sense to apply this to, what's the one movie we can watch on movie night such that by doing it, right, everything will be easier and necessary.
Notebook.
The Notebook. Okay, there we go. Romantic comedies, of course. But there are bigger buckets where you could apply this wisdom. What's the one thing, the focusing question at the heart of the book for your spiritual life, your physical health, all of these areas. Today, we're going to focus a little bit on business, but you're going to see from some of the stuff that Billy's got to share with us that this thinking, this EV, that when you're looking at expected value of your decisions, it applies to everything. It applies to your health. It applies to how you insure yourself. So many things, financial, but business is one of the areas where we can absolutely apply it. So before I bring Billy on, I'm just going to remind you, here's someone who had to make his living knowing the odds of his decisions. And when I was preparing for this, I read a great post by my friend Taylor Pearson, and he was talking about this simple phenomenon that there are a lot of people who know that this is the correct thing to do, right? I should be doing this for my business. I should be lead generating every day. But they don't always get the outcome they expect in the first time they do it. And so they stop doing it because even though they were doing the correct thing, they didn't get the right response. And so much of this conversation we're going to be talking about is understanding that when you're doing the correct thing, the right results do show up over time and they magnify. And so we just have to believe in that. So Billy, if you're listening, I would love it if you would go ahead and unmute yourself so that we can start this conversation. Billy, are you there?
Hey, I'm here.
Yay! We both had our heart stop since we had so many audio problems last month. with John Assaraf. We were like, "Wah! All right, yay!" So welcome to the One Thing webinar. I really appreciate you donating your time and your wisdom to us.
Definitely. Thanks for having me.
Well, let's just start this off. We came up with an outline when we were preparing for this. What is it? What is expected value? How does that impact our decisions? Why is it important? What do you need to do to take advantage of it? Where do you employ it? And then there's this other idea of the sunk cost fallacy and how does that play into it? So why don't we just start with the headline? Can you quickly explain to us what is expected value?
Sure. So the definition of expected value is the sum of all possible values for a random variable. And basically, you're going to calculate that by the probability of occurrence. So to put that in kind of layman's terms would be, let's say you and I flipped a coin, and we each put $1 in, and we said the winner of the flip is going to get $2. So neither of us would each have a 50-50 chance. So it's obvious that, our expected value of that bet would be $1 because 50% times $2. So we're really not making anything with that because each of us invested the same thing and each of us got the same percentage of return. So that's a really simplistic way to look at it. But in our everyday lives, in our businesses, there's all sorts of decisions. We make dozens or hundreds of decisions a day, and all of these decisions actually have an expected value. But most people don't put any thought into it. They just do either what's become a habit of theirs or what other people are doing. So they don't actually think about what is the actual benefit, what is the expected value of this decision. So if we flip that example a little bit and said, well, instead of doing a coin, why don't we do a gumball machine? And if we each put $1 in and there were three blue gumballs and one red one, it wouldn't be the same odds. So if we each put $1 in and I said, Jay, you pick which color you want, that'd be a horrible bet for me because every time I make that bet, I'm going to lose. And the way that most people go through life is they make decisions that they're losing every single time they make that decision. But because they can't see it in the form of money, they can't see it like they're not actually losing money that time. They don't realize they're costing themselves a lot of money. And on the flip side, people pass up a lot of great investments or just daily decisions, and they don't see themselves not making the money, and so they don't think that they're actually losing money, but they are every day. And so if we think about, a couple different examples, I don't know if you want to dive into the other examples later, but why is EV important? That's the biggest thing is, what are the decisions you make on a daily basis and why are you making them? So if ask most people, why are you making the decisions you make? It's hard for them to give you a logical answer to it. So basically, they would say, "Oh, everybody does that," but that's not logical at all. There's no thought. There's no actual calculation of why you made that decision.
Billy, can I just echo and underscore what you just said? I do think that we tend to role model success, and a lot of people will just wholesale import habits and strategies from people without just pausing. And it doesn't take 5 days, right? It doesn't take a weekend retreat to figure this stuff out and ask, is doing this going to deliver for me what I actually want? They just see that it's a behavior or something that someone successful is doing. I don't actually know poker, but I know that they're in blackjack. There's always hands that you're supposed to double down on. And when I show up, I went to Vegas recently. I had a small budget to gamble with. I was pretty much dependent on the dealer to tell me what to do. And I was just going to do what everybody else did. I didn't have any bigger strategy than that. And so guess what actually happened to my money?
You lost it all.
Gone.
Yeah, exactly. I had fun, and that was my budget. What would I feel good losing and still feel entertained? But I think that sort of thinking shows up in a lot of areas in our life. Like if I'm a personal trainer, well, I'm going to do what our number one trainer does. And there's wisdom in role modeling success, but you're saying we should just take a beat and say, based on my goals and what I'm doing, will this evaluate whether it really should work for you or not?
100%. And you brought up a good example that people might resonate with is the blackjack example. It's a great example of when you know the expected value is a negative expected value, but since you're not realizing the money in one shot, you don't notice it. So for example, every time if somebody was a perfect blackjack player, played straight by the book, No card counting or any of that, just straight, here's exactly how you should play, you're at about a negative 1% advantage to the casino based on the rules. So for every $100 bet you make, you're losing $1 in expected value. And so most people, they'll get lucky a couple times and they'll win and say, oh, I'm good at this game, but they're not actually good at that game. They're just, it goes up and down. There's just swings, but the expected value remains the same. It's still a negative $1 bet. Every $100 bet you make, no matter if you're getting lucky or not getting lucky. And so when we apply that to our own lives, it's the same, except most people don't realize that there's all sorts of decisions. I mean, you brought up the trainer example. How many trainers do you know that are basically making roughly the same amount of money, charging the same hourly rates? And I can tell you exactly why that is. It's because they're doing the same things. They're basically, pretty much the same style of trainer, type of trainer, value of trainer as everybody else. And all their activities is basically their thought process is, I need to maximize the amount of money I make. But that's not a wrong thought process. But the problem is in the way they go about it. They do it by trying to earn as much short-term income as possible. So I'm going to work 10 hours, 12 hours a day and make as much money as possible. Well, great. The minute you stop doing that, you make $0. So, and you still haven't actually made a lot of money for your time. So with somebody else with basically recognizing that I need to spend my time on better activities, what are better activities? Well, for a personal trainer, it would be, increasing your brand awareness. Like why should someone train with you? Do you, have you built an audience? Have you built a name for yourself? Have you increased your actual value or your perceived value from a marketing standpoint so that, instead of getting $30 an hour, you're getting $80 an hour. And, maybe you think about, well, wait a minute, is training people one-on-one actually a good use of my time? Let me think about other options. And it wouldn't take long for you to realize if the goal is possible, training one person on an hourly rate would be a really, really bad use of time. And to go further with that, then just to do as many of those hours as possible is like the lowest expected value activities you could take, but that's what almost every trainer does.
And I had this aha when we were talking. I had a great trainer, and he followed the maximize my value, right? And he trained with us, Dallas. I'll call him. He's one of the best trainers in Austin, Texas. Dallas Seatley, if you're there, love you, love Camp Gladiator. And over time, it seemed like every 6 to 9 months, he'd say, hey, guys, my rates have gone up. And by the way, I got promoted, and I'm now this at our camps, and I'm doing this and that. And he definitely communicated to us that his value was going up. And at a certain point, he actually exceeded our budget. And I also felt like he was even then looking at, well, what's the maximum per hour I can do? And he was methodically working to increase. So instead of just throwing more hours at it, he was trying to get more in every hour. And then this whole camp phenomenon shows up. And even if it's just $10 per person for that hour, he's like, wow, if I do a lot of work up front, I can get 150 people there. And now I've gone from $30 an hour to $150 an hour. Is that kind of like, right, that's EV thinking in action, right?
100%. I mean, it'd be the same. Everybody here knows your books. It'd be the same if instead of writing books, you just said, I'm going to basically teach you the book in a one-on-one setting. Unless somebody's going to pay you such an extreme amount of money, tens of thousands of dollars per hour, it probably doesn't become worth your time.
That's right. And you know what? It's one of those things that you take on faith as a writer, right? It took us 5 years to write the one thing. And if you're just purely looking at it that way, you're like, what? But you have a big outcome that you expect to get from it. So we know why it's important. Should we go then to question 2 on our outline? Like, what do you need to do to take advantage of it?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is just to – actually, I'm getting a little feedback on your NJ.
All right, I will.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you fine, and it might just be a little bit of a loop from the speaker to the microphone. I just tuned it a little bit for us.
Okay, I'm hearing myself.
You still hear yourself?
I think so. No, yep. It's better now.
You're coming through with us just loud and clear. It's the fun thing about these webinars is sometimes the audio over internet can be a lot of fun. So what do you need to take advantage of it? One of the things we talked about is, like, in the beginning, you just kind of need to know what your dollars per hour is. Is that a good place to start this discussion?
Yeah, it's perfect. Actually, I'm still getting that feedback. Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you just fine.
Okay, I think I'm hearing myself. on the playback.
Okay. All right. Well, you keep talking, and I will work on this side to eliminate that from
Okay,
our
cool.
side. Okay.
Cool. Yeah. So knowing your hourly rate is a good first step to, figuring out, what is your current time worth. But it's only going to tell you what your current time is worth. So, for example, if I make $10 an hour and I go work all day, well, my time is still worth $10 an hour. Now, with expected value, like we talked about, the actual income doesn't show up right away, right? So if I do a high expected value activity today, it doesn't mean I get paid on that today. And so, when you look at, let's say your, daily to-do list, let's say if you have, 3 to 5 things that you're really, the task that is going to lead you to accomplishing your goal. Well, what is the highest value activities? And most people, again, think about just the income. But, if we look at the income, we're totally discounting the actual expected value. So if you said, I want to work on the highest expected value activities, a lot of times it's absolutely not going to be what the short-term income is, because short-term income is usually taking up your time away from activities that could have built future value. So, for example, if you're building an email list, I know we're going to get into this one later, but if you're building an email list, for example, the actual activities that lead you to building an email list may pay you literally $0.
Hold on. We're going to go to that. Let's go to that. I want to just really quickly. You've given us the context, and we need to do that. And I'm just going to pause because I'm going to play webinar listener advocate. If you don't know how to calculate your dollars per hour, it's actually not that complicated. So if you've got a piece of paper handy, you just take what your earnings were last year, right? And you divide that by the number's 2,000, correct? Can you hear me?
Yes, I mean, yeah.
Yeah. So you take it because the average person works 40 hours a week, 50 weeks a year. That's 2,000. And the way I always look at it is if you are a $50,000 a year employee, entrepreneur, you're essentially $25 per hour. You can kind of take the 50,000, take the 50 out of it and divide it by 2, and you've shortcutted straight to this is what my dollars per hour is today.
Yep, exactly.
And that allows you then to look at your activities and say, what are the activities that are greater or lesser than that, and decide where you need to focus your activities. Do they need to know anything else before we move to I would love to go to that example and show them the math if we're going to do the email, because that's a great concept of future value versus today value.
Totally. Yeah, we can come back to sunk cost fallacy.
Awesome. All right, we'll do that. Let me go to, really quickly, I'm going to go to the example right here. And this is the list building. And we just use real estate agent because we know that a lot of realtors are on this call. And why don't you now go back to the example of how this works with long-term versus short-term, and I'll navigate through the numbers for us.
Okay, sure. So, for example, if someone is selling houses, if they're a realtor, their main job is to sell a house. So, most realtors would spend most of their time trying to figure out how to sell more houses. Now, that's not a bad, first step, but the problem with that is that most of them will do the same exact activities. So if they were, low expected value activities, they're only going to get lower because everybody's doing the same thing. Let me show you a house. Let me do an open house. So the problem is the activities they're taking are, I need to get sales today. I want to go, show you a house, make sales calls. But if we just, the example we have here is if somebody made $45,000, selling 9 houses a year, they're making roughly $22.50 per hour in being a realtor. Now, if we just said, let's just take somebody from scratch and say, instead of going and trying to sell a lot of houses short term, let's just pretend you took an activity that's significantly higher value. Let's say you're building your email list. Now, a lot of you, if you don't have an email list, you might say, well, what's the purpose in that? And if we look at the actual value of, what is a lead worth to you? And then if we look at, okay, the average commission is $5,000, and we're just going to pretend somebody buys a home every 10 years. So each person on average, that you would have a lead of is worth $500 a year. Now, you might say, well, yeah, but what if they don't buy from me? So if we look at it and say, if your whole strategy became, instead of trying to sell people houses all the time, just building the value up for the people that your community, if you build an actual list, you can do it a number of ways: blogs, podcasts, community events. But let's just say they bought a home from you 20% of the time, those once every 10 years that they bought. That lead is actually worth $100 to you. So, if you're doing activities that bring you leads, you're bringing in money. It's just not realized today in short-term income. So, for example, if somebody built a list of, let's say, 5,000 of these contacts, it's actually extremely valuable, and especially relative to what the normal realtor is doing. 5,000 of these contacts, if they were, actually good leads you kept in touch with, gave actual value to, your hourly rate's probably going to be hundreds of dollars per hour. And I can, Jay, I don't know if you want to get further into that. I can give you actually a specific example from last week on my own list if you want.
No, I'd love that. And just really quickly, like, we didn't pull these numbers out of air, right? The 9 transactions per year and the 5,000, that's roughly what NAR says is the average. And so, the whole point of the one thing, a lot of people say, so I don't want to do that. And what Gary will often tell them is, if you don't want to do what you need to do to have the best success possible, you may just be arguing for average. And that the subtitle of our book is Extraordinary. And extraordinary results are possible for people. So I know that this is something that you've mastered at a pretty high level. So I'd love to hear a specific example from your world. And I'll only interrupt you if I think we need to give some context about what you're selling and how you're doing it. But go ahead and give us that example. That would be fabulous.
Sure. So, basically for my blog and podcast, I just put out free content all the time. So if I want to write an article, I have a community, I have an email list, and basically a lot of the things that I do, I don't make any money. And so, a lot of people would say, why do you do them? Well, obviously the main reason I do them is I actually enjoy doing it. So if I want to write an article, something like that. But a lot of people look at the activities and say, oh, you could do so much better. Why don't you just, sell daily coaching on your site instead? Stop doing all the stuff you're doing. Stop building your list. People will pay you for your knowledge. And if I did that, I would definitely make a lot more short-term income, but I would also, have a significantly smaller list. So, for example, literally last week, I launched a program on Forever Jobless. And again, I pretty much never sell anything on Forever Jobless. And, once every year or so, I'll, launch some sort of program. So last week, I launched a program and said, hey, we're running this program. If you'd like to sign up, sign up. And within the first 24 hours, we brought in $100,000. And, most people would look at that and say, oh, wow, like this program brings you this amount of money. And instantly I would tell them, no, that's backwards thinking. I'm realizing the income today, but the actual income was built up over the last year, 2 years, 3 years of, basically doing the high expected value activities of building a list and having an audience and those sort of things. And when you want to basically, collect on the money, so to speak, you offer something of value that costs money. And so, most people would not do that. They would, sell any product, click on my affiliate link, buy my courses, all that stuff. But it's, they're sacrificing long-term expected value for short-term income. And so, it's, with a lot of people with larger lists or platforms of some sort, today they could literally click a button, send an email, and make 6 figures. And it has nothing to do with what they did today. It has a little bit to do with what they did today, but the real value was in what were all the high expected value activities you did in the past that are now coming to fruition.
Hey, Billy, this is Jeff. Let me interrupt and give some context to the people who maybe are not too familiar with internet marketing terms. What Billy's talking about is the concept of he puts up a website, he publishes free content, he invests his time writing articles, he invests his time creating a podcast, adding value, just like what we're doing right now. We're not making any money from this. This is 100% us adding value to you. And at one point in time, you end up on his website and it says, would you like this guide or this resource? Put your email in here. So this is not like, let me pull all my LinkedIn friends or Facebook friends and take all their emails and blast them. These are people who actually went to your website and gave permission for you to email them. This is a lot of work on the front end to even just capture that email. But Billy has done this consistently for such a period of time, and he's added so much value in the quote unquote relationship bank account that comes the day when he says, hey, I'm launching this program, boom, $100,000 in 24 hours.
Right, and the same applies in any industry, whether they're a realtor, whether they're a trainer. It could be building the same audience and having the longer term effects rather than short term hourly rates.
Yeah, I was going to say I've been watching this as an author is where I first became aware of it, and I was, wow, some people are getting vastly different results. They're not having to go from launch to launch and really have to throw their world into confusion every time they have something new they want to bring out to the world. They've just built an audience for themselves. And I started observing it. Then we started doing it. And then now that I'm aware of it, I see it in every single industry, like even the Dollar Shave Club, right, which I subscribe to based on a cool video. I get a little fun newsletter every time I get my, razors every month for $1. And they're trying to continue to build that relationship so that over time, when they have new services, they've earned the right to talk to me about it. And I welcome them to it. So this is not unique to any one industry. I do think that with the internet and the way we communicate, it's just kind of a fundamental part of business.
So if we go ahead.
No, go ahead, Billy. We couldn't hear you.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I don't know if you want to show them a different example, or we could talk about some of the sunk cost fallacies that probably happen in their lives day to day.
I'd actually be really interested to engage with the people who are listening right now. For you guys, we want to make this applicable for you. Give us some context on what you're doing right now, and then maybe Billy will be able to specifically identify how you can start applying expected value today.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that's one of the things that Ian and our team just reminded me. We need to remind folks, use the questions toolbar. If you've got specific questions that we can answer, that's a great occasion to use it. And we'll start curating those. And I can ask Billy those questions as we go, or at the actual Q&A time. So, Billy, would you like me to go to the example you gave on dental insurance?
Yeah, sure.
All right, there we go. That was a little bit. I have to hit mute and unmute because that's the way we found to cancel out the echo. So you just heard me going because I missed the button.
Okay, cool. So this example it's some of the numbers are kind of rough guesstimates, but the dental insurance example is it's applicable to almost everyone. Everyone has the decision: do you want dental insurance or don't you? And the large majority of people have dental insurance, I believe. And the reason they do this is because they think it's an emotional decision. They think if something happens to my teeth, I don't want to have to pay a bunch of money. It's all emotional instead of logic. Hey, if I break my teeth, I don't want to spend all that money. But if we actually look at the numbers, and again, these are rough numbers, but an insurance company will not insure you if they can't make money on you. So basically, anytime you get insurance, they're making money because they're buying the risk from you, so to speak. So if dental insurance costs you $360 a year, lots of times, almost every time, you're never going to hit what you would have paid in dental insurance. So in other words, if you clean your teeth once a year, maybe even get a cavity, and you can see here we broke it down to where each year you can tell the expected value versus what the actual cost would be. So someone would look at a broken tooth and say it might cost me $500 for a broken tooth, but when you think about expected value, when is that happening? It's not happening every year. So the $500 is actually about $20 a year that you're paying if you were to pay it on your own. So it might cost you $200 a year to go to the dentist on your own, but instead people say, I don't want the risk. What if something happens? Let me pay $360 a year for insurance, so I don't have the risk. Well, all you're doing is paying extra all the time just to not have any ups and downs, so to speak. And so, this is just one of many examples where people make really bad decisions on a daily basis because they don't actually put any thought to the numbers. They just say, well, everybody has dental insurance, or what if I break my teeth or something like that? There's no actual logic behind it.
I love that. And you said insurance company they almost never lose. And that's kind of like the casino, right? Because they've stopped to know the expected value of how these things work. They've stacked the odds in their favor. And great businesses actually do that almost all the time. They look at what the right decision is, the right path to do, and they're pretty relentless at sticking to it because they know that over time it pays off and tends to pay off big. And I just have to mention here the fudge factor. When I wrote that, I didn't even realize that in the context of tooth decay, and it's actually kind of a nice pun.
That was punny, Jay.
Yeah, I know. That's not even my thing. So one of the things I say when I look at this, like I get it. And until I got an HSA, I didn't live this. But the moment I realized the health savings account, that's one of the things they offered in my work, I was like, oh, wow. If I set this stuff aside and I don't actually use it, I'm kind of self-insuring for my future. And then as soon as I've hit X amount, my maximum out of pocket for a year, I don't have to contribute anymore. And now my insurance essentially becomes free on a monthly basis. So like investing in so many other things, if you're willing to do what others are unwilling to do, start setting aside $200 a year until you look at your maximum risk for a year and you've got that and you have the ability to hold it. Then you don't even have to set that aside on an annual basis. So we talked about bankroll management, because I was fascinated with your history and we didn't really go into it, the poker playing and then how that translated to business. But in the context of this bankroll management, this is kind of how you look at your dollars and set them aside and use them according to the game you're playing, right?
Yeah, exactly. Basically, just making sure that to cover any of the ups and downs.
Right. So if I don't know the odds on this, but like I remember someone telling me that if you wanted to play, this is how bad I am, why I only go to Vegas like once every 3 years. But like if you play craps, like he said, make sure you have enough to play 36 times or the odds won't come back in your favor. And that's like an example of like, oh, so you can actually get the maximum, whatever the maximum odds will be for you out of that. And in this case, that 200 a year, if you could not afford to fix a broken tooth, and you certainly can't afford to walk around in pain, then while you're insured, you start setting aside money so that you'd be able to self-insure. And it's that kind of long-term thinking that changes short-term behavior that over time starts to set you free. And it's just the domino run. They're little dominoes that you look up and you're not paying for this insurance. And 5 other things, you're investing more and your wealth can grow at a really rapid pace.
Right. Yeah. Instead of needing to pay $30 every month, if someone just saves up, $500 or $1,000 for a bad case scenario, they'll be good. In poker, we had the same rules, so to speak, on bankroll management. It was if I want to move up to a certain level, just to handle the swings of the game, I need to have at least 20 to 30 buy-ins of whatever game I'm playing to handle it. So even if you're a great player, you can still lose your money if you don't have enough to go to the table with. So, and a perfect example of this is for health insurance. So health insurance, similar to dental insurance, obviously they're making money off of you, but, most people should be insured. I mean, it's if something happened to you, you don't want to be left with a $100,000 bill or a $500,000 bill if something really bad happened. And so for me, what I do is I have the highest deductible plan possible because, and if I didn't have any money saved, I couldn't do that because if something bad happened, I'd be in big trouble. But I think my deductible is, $10,000 or something because I know it's a really bad bet if I pay the insurance company, 50% more, 100% more, whatever it is, to get a much lower deductible when, my health is pretty good. And so, if you're, keep in mind, the insurance companies are insuring people on the average health rates. And so if you take good care of yourself, if you eat healthy, if you go to the gym, well, you're actually paying more in terms of expected value versus somebody else. So it makes even more sense for you to think about, wait a minute, where can I make money in terms of expected value? Well, do a higher deductible if you have the money. Now, if you didn't have the money, then you would have to say, well, what if I get a $5,000 bill? I can't pay it. And so then you'd have to do the higher, lower deductible, the higher monthly payments.
So Billy, I want to shift here, and we're not quite at the Q&A yet, but I also want to make this as applicable for people as possible. And I saw Sharon put something in the questions box saying that for a startup company selling B2B, what's an applicable method to implement expected value?
So if you're in sales?
So she says she's a startup company selling business to business. So sure, let's go sales.
Okay. So basically, I would, if it were me, I would look at, I would spend a lot of my time finding out where the best leads were. And so I've never been in that role, in a sales role like that. So, but if I were thinking about, what would you need to do? Well, you need to find the most optimal customers, who match with your product or service. And, I think most people, again, I haven't been in that industry, but I think most people would probably just start run and gun, like hit the phones, try and sell. But, where are the most valuable leads for your business? And I would spend all my time there.
That's actually, you just struck a chord with me because I used to be in sales, business to business. I was selling copiers for Xerox, and then I was in medical device sales. And what I originally learned was cold call, cold call, cold call, cold call, cold call. And I only got so far. And there once came a day where I suddenly said, where are the people who would be my ideal customer? And I was even willing to pay, in some cases, thousands of dollars to get in the room at certain events with these people so that I could simply form a relationship with them. There was not a hard ROI there, but just made sense to me that if I could get in the room with the big fish and form relationships with them, something good would happen over time. And then big deals just started falling in my lap.
Yeah, you made a great example. It's with like mastermind groups and conferences and things like that. That's why people pay a lot of money to be in certain rooms, is because all their customers are there. And if we look at it from let's say if we wanted to really look at it in expected value, we could say, well, what is the chance of converting these customers on a cold call? 1%, 0.5%. It's very small probably, but let's pretend that you got in the same room and shook hands with a person. What is your rate change to? What is your conversion rate change to? And then if you look at the value of, what is the sale for you? So for example, the sale for you is $1,000 and you're cold calling people all day and you're getting a 0.1% conversion rate. That's going to be a lot of work for a very little amount of money. Now let's say instead you booked a plane ticket and started going to conferences or masterminds and getting in the same room as your ideal customers. And if you had a good product that would actually convert, all you need to do is get in front of the people. So, maybe your conversion rate would 10x or 20x, and all of a sudden, every hand you're taking is worth $200.
I love that. And it's funny, when Jeff was sharing, his sales experience, I remember we were working with a very large biomedical company, which didn't give us the right to say their name, but one of their new salespeople introduced the book. Their sales in this one team were lagging, and they just did that exercise. It took them about 10 minutes. They said, of all the customers that we could potentially reach out to, they just asked the question like we talk about in the book, what would be the one that if we really truly focused on might actually deliver all of our needs? And this is the 80-20 principle, right? It's you're playing the odds. Sometimes it's intuitive. Sometimes, like if you were doing your internet purchases for these businesses, you could do like research on AdWords and stuff, but you can look at it and say, well, let's do this. And so this group, they had gone from being number 5 in the company to number 29 in the company as a group. In the end of the third quarter, they focused all of their efforts around one product, one group to sell to. And by the end of the year, they'd gone all the way back to the top 3, which opened up a 4-year relationship between our book company and this huge company, because they were like, we've got to teach this principle about how to identify the thing that has the biggest impact. And when you do that, I think you both hit it. Like the results aren't often immediate. And that's the question actually we have from Christine. It's long-term thinking versus short-term thinking. If I'm going to actually hit my goal versus just get grocery money this week, how can I do that in a way that gets me my maximum results and actually hits my goal?
I love that. Before we do go to Q&A, Billy, I want you to cover sunk cost fallacy because I think that's really valuable. And then right after that, we're going to get into Q&A. So everybody, if you have questions about this, please submit them in the questions box now so we can start flagging them and then we can knock as many out as possible.
Yeah, so walk us through the sunk cost fallacy, Billy.
Sure. So sunk cost fallacy is when basically someone has made, to apply it to someone's life or business, they've made a certain investment, whether that be time or money. And you hear it all the time. Oh, I've already spent so much time on this. I can't give it up now. I've already spent so much money. I got to stick with it. And you see this all the time, whether, someone bought a stock, whether they bought some real estate and it was a bad investment and they're losing money. And so what they say is, instead of looking and saying, what is the right decision? What's the expected value of a decision here? They will continue holding it, losing more money just because they don't want to, they don't want to feel like they lost. So for example, if the stock, a stock is tanking and it's things are bad, but you've got money in it, most people would say, well, yeah, but I'm down $10,000. I want to at least wait until it gets even. You'll hear that at a blackjack table a lot. I want to at least get even. But the thing is, it doesn't matter where you are. The expected value is the same. If you're at a blackjack table, every $100 you put in is still negative $1. If you're in a bad stock, it doesn't matter that you have money in it or not. Like, take yourself out of the situation and say, if I didn't have any money in it, would I still do that today? Or if I didn't have any time in it? So, applying it to someone's life in a job or a business, you hear it all the time. My dream is to start a business, but I have 10 years in my job. I have so much time invested. Well, the time is irrelevant. Like today, what is the expected value of the job you're in? And then what is the expected value of the business you want to start? And the time or money you have in something is completely irrelevant.
Billy, I'm going to throw maybe a tougher question at you. Let's go back to your thought process, like your email example, or if a lot of traditional marketing, we call it farming, where they're doing direct mail to a neighborhood and they have an expectation for results. And those are both activities that, though there's endless examples of people who've built like billion-dollar companies on those practices, it takes time for those results to show up. How do you know if you're in one of these sunk cost fallacies where you're just throwing good money after bad, or I just need to be more patient and wait for the results to come in?
Yeah, and it's tricky because sometimes you don't know. And so what I often do in those situations is I'll put a percentage chance of almost like a confidence interval, right? So I'll say, you know what, I think this is going to happen 70% of the time. And I think this will happen 30% of the time. So for example, if I start a business, no one has a 100% success rate if they start a business. So I can't go into a business and say, if this works, I make $1 million. Great. So I'm going to make $1 million. It doesn't work like that. I might say, you know what, this is a difficult business to start. I'm not sure if it's going to make it. We'll give it a 20% chance of success. Now, if you say the upside is worth $1 million, and let's just pretend 80% of the time I'm just going to fail completely and lose all the money. The expected value of that business venture is $200,000. So if you make $40,000 a year in a job versus the $200,000 expected value in a business, you might say, well, I'm not guaranteed the $200,000 at all. Like, I know I'm taking a risk, but it's a pretty good bet because the expected value is worth so much more money. Now if we go back to bankroll management, we need to consider that as well, because if I have $0 saved, I can't take that risk because I'm on the streets if I fail. So the bankroll management will apply to a lot of these, because unless your confidence interval is at 100%, then you have to have somewhat of a cushion. So if you worked in a job for a while and you've saved up a bunch of money, you can say, you know what, I know this is clearly the best decision is to start the business. It has 5 times the expected value, and I have money saved. So you could always say, I'm going to make the right bet, and then if it doesn't work, just go back to the job. No big deal. And that's why a cushion for some of these things is really important.
I was literally gonna ask you. In theory, this is all great, but at the end of the day, you still have to keep a roof over the head and put
Yep.
food on the table. So how do you blend that? And I think you just nailed it. You save it up. Or I can even share in my case, before coming here to work with Gary and Jay, I was in medical sales, and I knew that in the long run it was not the right position for me, but I didn't want to just quit cold turkey and start a business, and so I started a side hustle, and ultimately, doing a lot of activities that yielded $0 in the short term ended up landing me the opportunity to move here and do this now.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's get to Q&A.
All right, let's dive in. Did you see? Let's get one of these. Are you ready to go with that, Billy?
Yeah, good to go.
All right, I'm just going to look at this real quick. Startup company, we did that one. I'm just trying to read through here really quickly. What's the fastest path to building a mailing list from scratch? Asked Marvin.
Oof.
And I think I know who Marvin is. So,
Yeah.
hi, Marvin.
Yeah, you want me to go ahead and answer?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to answer specifically because it's a broad question, but, because different industries are going to have different things, right? So if you had, let's say a product-based business that was, had a good design, had good branding, you might go to something like Instagram to show, your product. But you wouldn't do the same, you might not put product videos on YouTube. So it's a tough question to answer without knowing your specific business. But, basically, I wouldn't just jump in and start doing activities. I would look at, what are all the possibilities of the different avenues that you could generate leads? And then I would say, how much time do I think it would take to generate these leads? And then I would say, what is the expected conversion rate percentage based on this platform for my specific product or service? So, if I think I'm a good writer, I'm going to do a blog over, me doing speaking events if I'm not a good speaker. Where somebody else might want to do speaking or a lot of podcasting and things like that, if they're a good speaker and not a writer. And so a lot of it is going to play to your skill sets and product or service.
And I'll jump in to streamline this. Like Billy said, it's you can go so many directions. At the end of the day, the fastest way to do it is through paid advertising. That's what the professionals do. But I don't want to go too terribly off task. The next one that we have is from Ronald, which is, I've been working on my database for a few months and maintaining contacts with them at least once a year and up to 4 times a year. How do you manage the personal touch with a very large database?
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, you could do things like this with, kind of group calls where people get access to you. But if you have a large database, like, I have tens of thousands of people on the platform, it'd be hard to individually do calls with people, impossible. So basically, you need to spend your time where you think it's best, whether you can get 1,000 people on a call like this where you're covering what a lot of people want to hear. There's no, I would say if you knew, who your best customers or who your best people were, I would get on the phones with them over kind of a spray and pray strategy.
Yeah, and Ronald, I'll tell you that's why we're doing the Facebook Lives, is because it's an opportunity for us to communicate with people at scale. But for the people who actually join live, I have the opportunity to interact with them one-on-one, and it gives a much more personal touch.
And I'll add to this, because this is like a great question. We all struggle with it, right? How do we leverage a personal touch in this age so that it feels like a conversation and not a sales pitch? And like one of the things that we did with our online training is we built a private Facebook group, and we only invited people in that were part of that circle. And we have hundreds of people there, but now we can, because it's a little asynchronous, right? They're not expecting me to respond immediately. Jeff or the team can go in, give them very specific responses to their specific questions. And it's just there's a lot of platforms like that today that you can scale to touch a large audience and do it pretty frequently.
I loved this.
I know some.
Or go ahead, Billy.
No, I was just going to say, I know some people use the services where they give you handwritten letters, and you sign your letter. Basically it looks like your handwriting and everything, and they'll send personalized letters to all of their audience.
Bond.co.
So the only way.
Is that it?
Yeah, the only way you could do.
Is that bond.co?
I'm not sure which one. I've never used it, but that's a way where if you knew the value of someone on your list or in your audience, you could say, can I spend, a couple dollars per person to do this? And if someone's worth $100 to you and nobody else is getting in front of them like that, you're going to stand out a lot.
Cool. I love this question from Terry. She says, I'm a newer agent, no listing or buyers yet. I blog, farm, increase contacts with Sphere. I network online, but I'm not sure how to provide something of value if I don't have income yet.
So yeah, this is probably where I spend the most time, like upfront on a business before I consider getting in it, is where can I fill a gap in the market? How can you be better than what everyone else is doing on the market for one thing? It doesn't have to be, are you the expert at construction deals? Are you the expert at investment deals? Are you the expert at land deals? It's what most people try to do is they try to do the same as everyone else. It's really hard to get any results. So I guess the best advice, without knowing your situation more, would be just spend a lot of time. Like, it will pay off if you spend time now, not making money today, but spending time figuring out where is the gap in the market. Is there certain neighborhoods where there's just not a lot of people, hitting that area, offering value? So I would just spend a lot of time figuring out what you can do that nobody's doing in the area.
That's good. And, I think that just to remind folks, a few months ago, we had Ryan Levesque on as a guest. And one of the things he advised, his book is called Ask. And if you even have a small list of people, one of the best ways to figure it out is just ask them. I mean, it's so obvious. What is your biggest challenge you're struggling with? What's something, and it might be in a personal context. If you're brand new to your business, you can reach out to someone that like, a family member or someone that on a personal level who's likely to be your customer, and say, what would be the things that I could provide for you because I'm now inside this world that would have the best value to you? You'd be surprised how willing people are to tell you what they want. They just don't know to ask for it because they haven't thought about it.
Yep.
All right. Well, we have time for maybe one more question while we're scanning this. Billy, if people want to reach out and connect with you, we've got Forever Jobless up there. Is that the best way for them to reach out to you?
Yeah, just foreverjobless.com is the website, and then Forever Jobless on iTunes, Forever Jobless on Instagram. Yeah, they can reach me at all of them.
All right. Well, I saved one that's a really good one for you because I know that this is something that you've done in the past, and this is from Jamelia. Apologies if I mispronounced your name there.
Hemilia
or Jamelia. So it depends on how you pronounce the J. What's the process that I know that you've bought a lot of online stores? You've done that. And what is the process you use for picking the niches in your e-commerce stores? I've read a few of your blog posts about this, and I think that your strategy there is very applicable to a lot of other businesses. All you have to do is change e-commerce store for, my fitness business or whatever that is.
Yeah. So what I did with e-commerce stores was, I would go, a lot of my e-commerce stores I had purchased. And so I'd go to sites, I would find out, what they were making. I would find out what I thought that was worth to me based on my time, and I would determine what it was, what I would pay for it. And so, you had some sites that were making, I remember the first site I bought was making about $900 a month. And it was for sale for, I forget, the price might have been like $6,000. I called the lady. I'd never done any e-commerce. And I said, I want to buy your site. Will you sell it to me for $4,000? And she needed the money right away. And she said, yeah, I want to sell it. I need the money. And I bought it. And most people, and this was years ago, this was before e-commerce was more popular. So buying an e-commerce store, I didn't know anything about it, was, wait a minute, like, what if I get ripped off? What if the site crashes and doesn't make any money tomorrow? Like, these were all legitimate questions I had, where I didn't know what was going to happen if I bought it and the income went away because I didn't know enough about the business. And I believe that any investment you make, again, you can go back to what is the percentages that this is going to fail? What is it going to work? Put a number, percentage number next to each of them. What is the investment? So I paid $4,000. So, if X percent of the time it works, this is my monthly income. If, a certain percent of the time I get ripped off and it goes to zero, you calculate that in, and then you come up with a number. And I said, for any deal that made sense to me, that was in the beginning when I didn't know anything. That was literally how I was calculating it. Just, here's the percentage. If it all goes wrong and I make zero, I lose my money. And the percentage that if I hold that asset for a year, I would expect to make about $11,000, $12,000. And so I knew that it would have to fail the majority of the time for it not to be a good investment. And so I just continually did that.
All right. Well, Billy, thank you. So I want to just thank you again for sharing. And this is some deep stuff. And I know the first time I encountered this, I had to think about it a lot, and then I started getting it. And so I just, like any habit, thinking like this is something that you have to start out doing and then master over time. And I get the privilege of working with Gary Keller, and I can promise you that in the beginning, he had his notebook and he was doing math like Billy was doing, literally trying to figure out, is this the right move or not, and manually working it out. And now he makes these decisions on the fly at the speed of light. And I'll have to stop him and say, Gary, how did you arrive at that conclusion? And then he'll slow down and rewind for me and Jeff. And it's because he made thinking like this, thinking about the value of his time and his activities, he absolutely internalized it. And that's really fundamentally a lot of what the One Thing's about. So, Billy, thank you for helping us kind of dissect what this sort of thinking looks like in these areas at a really great level. I really appreciate that. And I'm just going to say thanks again for everybody who tuned in. And I'm going to turn it over really quickly to Jeff so that he can tell you what's up next month.
Awesome. So at the end of this, you'll get a link to fill out a quiz to give us feedback. We appreciate it. Within 24 hours, you'll get the recording of this webinar if you want to go back. All our archives are at theonething.com/webinars. Next month, we have James Clear, who's big in the productivity space. He's got an incredibly large following. He's also a huge fan of The One Thing. So I know we will have a really spirited discussion about how you can apply productivity to your life, get more done in less time. And then finally, check out our Facebook page. If you go to facebook.com/theonethingbook, we do those live streams every Monday and Thursday at 1 o'clock Central. I'm doing another one tomorrow. So all you have to do is just physically be on the Facebook page at 1 o'clock Central, and you will have the opportunity to go back and forth live. And it's a lot of fun for us. So we're really looking forward to that.
All right, Billy, thanks again. And thanks everybody who gave us an hour of your time. Hope you walked away with some valuable information and, like me, start taking baby steps into this sort of EV world of really making sure that the decisions we're making, we can take the risk out of them and know that we're investing in the right activities. Thanks a lot, folks. We'll see you next month.